Today we are going to discuss a very important topic, verbs. Konnichiwa minasan. Hey friends, how are you? Welcome to Saral Japani YouTube channel, a place where we study about Japan, Japanese and the Japanese culture. Today is lesson 67 of this series, Japanese for beginners, and the topic of today is Introduction to Verbs. If you are yet to subscribe this channel, please do so quickly so that you get notifications of all the new videos being posted. The URL of the channel is youtube.com/@saraljapani, that is SARALJAPANI. For the videos of all the previous lessons posted so far, do visit the playlist section of this channel and click on this playlist, Japanese Lessons for Beginners, and you will find all the lessons at one place. So let's begin today's lesson, lesson 67, Introduction to Verbs. So as per the generic definition of a verb, we all know verb is a word used to describe an action, state or occurrence and forming the main part of the predicate of a sentence, such as hear, become, happen, come, eat, play, work and so on. In Japanese, if we few generic examples of verbs, Tanaka-san eats sushi, Honda-san went to the market, Motohiro-san will come to Japan next year, Abe-san is listening to music. So all these words marked in red are verbs. Ishimoto-san have been jogging since morning. So we say that the forms of these verbs are different in different sentences, but the red marked words are the verbs in these sentences. There are certain factors that might impact the form of a verb in a sentence. As we saw in the previous examples, that the form of the verb was different in different sentences. So what are those factors? First and the most important one is tense, which provides information about the time of occurrence of the verb. That is, in future or in past or at present. Gender, the masculine or the feminine gender, these may have impact on the form of a verb. Then number, that is singular or plural. One or several or all of above may impact the form of the verb in a sentence as applicable to a specific language. For example, in Hindi, all three of these impact the verb. That is tense, gender, and number. All these three impact the verb. In Spanish, tense and gender impact the verb, while in English and Japanese, only the tense impacts the verb form. This, however, doesn't mean there is no gender or number in Japanese. There are special words to bring out the gender and number, but not directly impacting the verb form. So from the context or some other criteria, we get the information about the gender and the number, but not from the verb, unlike languages like Hindi and Spanish. Friends, do refresh your knowledge of below lessons before moving forward in this video, because in these lessons we discussed concepts which may be prerequisites for today's lesson. The first one is lesson 22, in which we discussed the basic sentence structure and we introduced the verb des. In lesson 37, it was related to gender basics, and that talked about the number, that is singularity and plurality as well. Lesson 59, in which we introduced the tense, and lesson 60, in which we discussed about the difference between the and des. Links to all these lessons have been given in the description section of this video. If we talk about verbs, the only verb that we have studied so far or has been studying so far is des, and also its past form, that is deshta, which indicates am, is, are, and was or were respectively. That is, des represents am, is, or are, and deshta represents was or were. So only this verb has been discussed so far in this series. So with this lesson, we shall start studying about verbs that describe specific actions like reading, writing, walking, talking, and so on. So let's begin today's lesson, Introduction to Verbs. In Japanese language, verbs can be categorized into four groups. So first of all, we look at the first three groups, 1, 2, and 3. And we shall begin with group 3 first because that's the simplest one. So what is there in group 3? The group 3 verbs in Japanese contains just two verbs. One is suru and the other is kuru. So what do they mean? Suru means to do something and kuru means to come. So these are the only two verbs which are categorized in group 3. And the reason for categorizing or segregating these two verbs into group 3 is that they don't follow any pattern and because they don't fit in either group 1 or group 2. That's why they have been classified as group 3 verbs. Next we have group 2. So we are moving in the opposite direction. That is, first we discussed group 3, then group 2, and then we will reach group 1. In group 2, we have those verbs which end in iru or eru. So this is iru, this is eru. So look at the difference between group 3 and group 2. Group 3, suru is the complete verb, kuru is the complete verb, but in group 2, this is not the complete verb, but the suffix of the verb form. That is iru and eru, verbs which end with iru and eru. So verbs that end in iru or eru in their base forms. Now what is a base form? Base form is nothing but the root form of the verb, which is also known as the dictionary form. Why it is called dictionary form? Because if we search in dictionary about a word, then we will find this form of the verb in the dictionary. So in Japanese dictionary, form of the verb is known as Jishokei. Jisho is dictionary and Jishokei is dictionary form of the word. So this is called dictionary form or Jishokei form, and which is nothing but the base form or the root form of the verb. So few examples of group 2 verbs is miru, which means to see, akeru, which means to open, and taberu, which means to eat. So if you look at all these three examples, you will find that all of these end either in iru or in eru. So this constitutes the group 2 of the Japanese verbs. Then we have group 1, in which we have verbs ending in u sound, u. So most of the verbs of Japanese fall under this category. So that's why this is the largest group, and that's why we started looking at from the group 3 first and then group 2 and then we reach group 1 where most of the verbs will be appearing. Some verbs even end in iru and eru in this category of group 1 because of certain exceptions which we will see in future lessons. So although iru and eru are part of group 2, but due to some exceptions there are some verbs which fall under group 1 category but they still end in iru and eru. So now let's look at few examples of these group 1 verbs. First one is au, which means to meet, kau, to buy or purchase, yomu, which means to read, suvaru, to sit, and gambaru, which means to work hard. Au, kau, yomu, suvaru, gambaru. So in each of these you can see that the verb ends in u sound. So this is group 1. So you can take a screenshot of this slide because it summarizes pretty well the three categories of Japanese verbs. Then we have the group 4. Since there are four groups, so group 1, group 2, group 3 we have just discussed. Group 4 contains those verbs which are called noun verbs. That is, verbs that are associated with nouns and don't have independent existence. So what does that mean? If we take an example, Benkyo suru. Benkyo suru. Here benkyo is the noun and suru, addition of suru makes it a verb. So suru is the verb as we saw in category 3 and benkyo is the noun. So the meaning of benkyo is study, and when suru is added it becomes to study. So we saw that suru, in this slide we saw that suru means to do. So to do here is to study. So benkyo suru is to study. So benkyo is the noun study, whereas benkyo suru is the verb to study. In Japanese, a verb form is impacted by the following things. Tense, as we discussed earlier, there is present or future tense and the past tense. Then affirmative and negative sentences. Affirmative meaning work will be done, or I will do the work, and negative is work won't be done, I won't be doing the work. Then the third factor that impacts the verb is the style, that is whether the verb has to be written in the polite or formal form or in the informal form. The base form of the verb is used in informal situations only. For example, taberu, this is the base form of the verb, so it can be used in informal situations and it is generally not considered to be highly polite. So polite or formal situations demand a suffix to be added, that is an additional part needs to be added to the root form of the verb. So let's look at few examples. Verb, for the formal version, we need to add mas, verb plus mas. So this makes taberu as tabemas. So here we can see it is the present or the future tense of the verb taberu. It is in affirmative and it is the formal form. Likewise, verb plus mashta, this gives the past tense. Taberu becomes tabemashita, and this is also the affirmative and also the formal form. Likewise, for the negative form we have masen, that is taberu becomes tabemasen, which means I won't eat. It is the negative form and again this is a formal form. Then we have verb when suffixed with masen deshta, taberu becomes tabemasen deshta, which is the past tense, also the negative form and it is also the formal form. So this is how the informal taberu becomes tabemas, tabemashita, tabemasen and tabemasen deshta by combining future, present or past tense, the affirmative or negative and the formal style of writing. In Japanese, there is not much difference between the present tense and the future tense. For example, iku, iku is the verb for to go. And in the formal form, it becomes iku becomes ikimas. So watashi wa ikimasu means I go, or since uh, it's so if I say watashi wa ikimasu, it doesn't get clear if it indicates I go or I will go or I am going. So in this example, ikimasu is the polite version or the formal version of the base verb iku, which means to go. Now, information or indication of this verb being present tense, present continuous tense, or future tense will be obtained from the context during the actual conversation. So just by saying watashi wa ikimasu, it won't be clear whether I will be going or I am currently going or I generally go. So this is the difference of Japanese from most of the other languages. So the verb in this case doesn't provide any such information about the correct tense belonging to the present or the future. So now let's look at some common verbs. First one is nomimas, which means to drink. So the root verb you can guess, the root verb is nomu. So this is a category 1 or group 1 verb. Nomu in polite form becomes nomimas, to drink. Taberu becomes tabemas, to eat. Kaimas, this is from cow, root verb. It becomes, cow becomes kaimas, means to buy or purchase. Then we have okimas. So this comes from the root verb oku. Okimas means to wake up from sleep. Nemas. Nemas is to sleep. Ikimas, kairimas, and modorimas. These three are extremely important because these are similar in meaning but have significant difference with one another. The first one is ikimas. Ikimas means to go, and it comes from the root verb iku. Iku becomes ikimas in the formal form. So ikimas means to go somewhere. Now, what is its difference from kairimas? Kairimas, which comes from the root verb kairu, kairimas means this also means to go, but to go to one's own home country, one's native place, his native village or city, or the native country. So when someone is returning back to his home country or home village or city, then the word kairimas is used. So the person won't be saying ikimas. Watashi wa ikimasu. He won't be saying ikimas. He will say kairimas. So this is the difference. If someone else is going to that same place, it will be ikimas for him. But if a person returns to or goes to his own country or place, native place, he will be using kairimas in this sentence. So this is an extremely important difference between ikimas and kairimas. The difference in usage in Japanese. Then there is a third one, modorimas. Modorimas means to return after going somewhere from the same point. That means if someone starts from a point and he has to return back to that original point, then the word modorimas is used, means to return to the same place from where he started. So this is how ikimas, kairimas, and modorimas are different from one another. So to recap, nomimas to drink, tabemas to eat, kaimas to buy or purchase, okimas to wake up, nemas to sleep, ikimas to go somewhere, kairimas to go or return to one's own home country or native place, modorimas to return after going somewhere from the same point. Few more. Asobimas. Asobimas means to play, generally used with children. Hashirimas means to run. Yomimas means to read. Benkyoshimas to study. So we saw earlier Benkyo Suru. You might remember we just discussed Benkyo Suru, which was the group 4 verb, and that was the category of noun verbs. So Benkyo is the noun which means study, and suru was to do something. So the addition of suru to benkyo made it a verb. So study, benkyo is study, which is noun, and benkyo suru is to study, which is verb. Now in the formal form, benkyo suru becomes benkyo shimas. So this is benkyo shimas. This also means to study. So for the noun verbs, we don't use simply mas, but we add an additional shi. So benkyo shimas. It's not benkyo mas, but benkyo shimas. Similarly, sampo shimas. Sampo shimas means to walk. So this is again a noun verb, and because of which we add an extra shi before mas. So she is used in case of noun verbs, that is group 4, to convert the noun into a verb form. So friends, that's all for today. So today we discussed about the basic introduction of verbs in Japanese, and you might have noticed that we didn't discuss any sentence as such, because to use these verbs in sentences, we need to study two important particles, ni and o. O particle we have discussed little bit in one of the previous lessons, but we haven't yet discussed ni particle. So in the next lesson, that is lesson 68, we will be discussing ni particle, and after that we will be able to form full sentences using verbs and other parts of the sentence. So I hope you have understood today's lesson. Till we meet again, arigato gozaimasu, matai masho.